Hi, everybody. Welcome to podcast number 18 of the Alexi Saul podcast. A slight change of direction this time. It is me talking to activist, filmmaker, and musician Saul Williams. If you listen to an earlier podcast, you will hear about me talk about Saul Williams before and how we met. I cover some of that ground again in the intro, my intro to Saul. It's an extraordinary event, and this is the first time, people sometimes say I'd like to have video of this, but I think this is an audio experience. But this was the first time. Occasionally, I regretted that we didn't have a camera because Saul Williams is the most beautiful person I have ever seen, frankly. He is so beautiful. And the way that he moves, even though he was sitting down at one point, he was making a point to me, and the way he kind of came towards me, and the extraordinary grace and power in that movement, and the way he's dressed and stuff. He don't just got up. I mean, he's just an extraordinarily beautiful human being. Anyway, so this is podcast number 18, Saul Williams.
And please excuse the sound quality of, hi, Talal here. Excuse the sound quality of this episode. We are in the atrium of the Mayfair, and it's a big
room. But yeah, you wouldn't choose to do a podcast.
No, it was the best space we could get. So, echo! So yeah, that's what we're dealing with. So, excuse that.
Yeah, but, the ambience will soon fade from your ears, and you will be left with the mellifluous words of Saul Williams. So, hello everybody, I'm here in the Mayfair Radisson Hotel in London's Mayfair, and I am with Saul Williams. And just to give you a bit of context for this, Saul, we're actually recording, our microphones are we're in a kind of atrium, and our microphones are balanced on two kind of wooden bulldogs with golden heads. I don't know what that's about. But anyway, it's that kind of hotel. So the reason that I was, on one of my other podcasts, I was talking about kind of, just kind of felicitous, magical, kind of one-off encounters, really. Mm-hmm. And I started talking about when me and Linda met you in Latitude in 2016. There's people who know Latitude. It's a really kind of slightly wanky kind of middle class. Well, you've been there as well, haven't you? But
yeah, I played it this year, and that's why we brought it up.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay. So it's kind of people like Richard Curtis and stuff. It's their local.
Yeah, like The Guardian do talks there and stuff. So that says it all, really, doesn't it?
Matthew Freud's always Esther Freud, and anyway. So
but it's good fun as well.
It's an amazing arts festival in many ways. Anyway, there's a little hotel on the site, a boarding house. We were staying there, having breakfast the next morning, and there's a guy there with his son. And you said you got the train there the day before, hadn't you?
Yep.
Because you'd lived in France, you thought, an industrialized Western country would have a train system that worked. And so you were faced with the idea of getting back to London. You'd got like 5 trains to get there, hadn't you? Anyway, we ended up.
It was complex.
Yeah. And there was no chance of you and your son getting back to London at all, really. So. You said, you guys going back to London? We said, yes. You give us a lift? I said, yeah. And then we just had the most magical car drive. I mean, I remember at one point I was so engrossed that I took the wrong turn and then we nearly ended up in Ipswich because you were getting on, and you also got on very well with Linda, who sadly can't be here because she's got to go to the doctors. But it was just an amazing, kind of car ride, really. You were somebody very different to normal person we would encounter, but it was and in a way where in the best way, glamorous, talented, international, compared to the dullards that we usually we mix with. So it was a magical event. We're kind of spoiling it by repeating it in a way, but it's amazing to see you again.
It's great to see
you. I guess. You tell us why you're in London, I guess, and just kind of what. Who are you?
I'm just gonna let you keep on going.
You never get to speak.
Yeah. I do remember that. You're reminding me of it. I forgot I was with my son. That's right. Yeah. And I was living in Paris at the time. I live in Los Angeles now. But yeah, at the time that was a very strange little festival that for some reason made sense to go to, and thank you for getting me back to London. Well, yeah, I'm here because my wife and I co-directed a film called Neptune Frost together that made its UK premiere this weekend at the BFI London Film Festival. And so, so we're kind of recuperating from that and about to fly to Lagos tomorrow.
Wow. So, I don't know where this is not my forte being an interviewer for but people. I lie to myself that people like its homespun qualities. But I don't know if you want to start with. I don't know how you got started as an artist, and then you've had the film is extraordinary. It's also what is also. I was yesterday at this thing called the Festival Resistance, which was a very old left kind of group of people. People who were in things like the Workers' Party and the Socialist Party. Yeah. And while you just thought, and while they seemed they're very nice people in many ways, and they will form a part of, if we are ever going to change things, they will form part of it, incredibly well informed. But also you think, I very much got the feeling that these people, that their modes of thinking were very old-fashioned, really, very stuck in that conventional kind of almost 19th century kind of revolutionary struggle. Whereas it seems to me that what you were particularly positing in this film was an entirely new and a different form of activism. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I like art and artists that kind of punch you in the face, I'm from New York. Kind of grew up on hip hop and theater in the 80s in New York. My parents were activists, and my father was a preacher, my mom's school teacher, but both very politically engaged and involved. And it was important to them that, we kind of understood the ways of the world and our place in it. And by our place in it, I think what I mean is, the type of situations we were facing primarily because of like skin color and all of this type of shit. And the history, my mom, for example, was a huge historian. She was excited about us learning different things, what have you, Yeah. And so anyway, we kind of grew up kind of loving not just and being exposed to not just art, but artists who were engaged. So one of my neighbors was Pete Seeger.
Okay.
All right. Pete Seeger used to sing at my father's church.
Wow.
And because of the way people responded, but this is in the hood, you know what I'm saying? So it's not
Pete
like people...
Seeger was singing in it, because Pete Seeger, just to describe, he had one of those beards that sort of went round the bottom of his chin, and like plaid shirt, and he sang about
worker songs and there was weird, for me it was always really weird because I'd be like, anytime Pete would come by my dad's church, my dad would be like, come on Pete and sing a song for us. And, you know, he'd get on the pulpit and be like, if I had a hammer or some shit like that. And me and my friends would always be cracking up. And we'd be like, what's wrong with my dad? But he always asked this like old white guy to sing these songs that we sing in school. Right. And slowly I'd start to learn like, he wrote them. You know, right. That would often be the response, like, we shall over. It'd be like, well, yeah. He played a role in writing those songs. So you'd be like, how is that possible? Aren't these 100-year-old songs? You know, like, but yeah. Wow. So people like Pete Seeger, singers like Odetta, you know, and so then I grew up on people like Public Enemy, all this shit. Basically, I'm pointing to like the politically engaged artists. My mom was like crazy about, let's say, Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier, you know? So, and then when I'm 8, I tell my mom and dad I want to be an actor when I grow up, and my dad's like, I'll support you as an actor if you get a law degree, and my mom's like, oh, then you should do your school report on, your next school report on Paul Robeson. So that's the type of, you know, engagement I had as a kid, and I guess as a result, some of that stuff is kind of reflected in my art, particularly Paul Robeson, right? Who also made a film in Rwanda in like 1937. What is it called? King something Mines?
King Solomon's Mines.
Is that what it's called? But yeah, there's a 1937 film that Paul Robeson shot in Rwanda. And so here we are in 2019, shooting this sci-fi musical that I wrote over the course of a few years, and we decide that we're ready to shoot. So November 2019, my wife, whose name is Anisi Uziman, who is Rwandan, we fly from LA to Rwanda and go into pre-production for this film. We start putting together a team. We build a village made of recycled computer parts. We start hiring choreographers, dancers, rehearsing them, recording them because we're shooting a musical, building lights, and film, and like there's no cinema rental in Rwanda, so we built the rails and the dolly and lights and all this type of stuff, and start preparing to shoot. And we shoot February. We start shooting February 2020, February 3rd. We wrap on March 4th, 2020. Rwanda shuts down March 8th, 2020. We probably learned about the pandemic like March 2nd. Because we had been in the craziness of the shoot. So like right before it wrapped, someone was like, did you guys hear about that thing? You know? We made it out of the country March 17th to fly back to LA with our hard drives, with the film, and went into quarantine, arriving in the States on March 18th and remotely connected with editors and all this type of stuff. And we're in post-production for the entirety of well, I mean, we're still in a weird state now, right, in terms of the pandemic. We can't say it's over, right? And premiered this film at Cannes in July, and here we are now. Right. So in short, that's what's up.
Thank you. Well, that's.
But in terms of what you were talking about, in terms of workers and that, because I mean, if you're wondering the connection is that the film centers around Colton miners and an intersex runaway, and essentially the connection between a Colton miner and an intersex runaway, and the subject matter that they share is sort of the realization of their role in a heavily exploited and, situation and world where we were programmed to be.
Well, maybe you could talk a bit more about Colton mining, really, because that's the kind of thing that is kept from us and is.
Sure. So yeah, Colton is the precious stone or metal that is 85% of which is mined in Central Africa, and it basically circulates power through small circuitry boards, which is to say that it's found in all of our smartphones, laptops, drones, what have you. And part of the inspiration of writing this story was discovering, the story of Colton. Simultaneously, I was learning about e-waste camps. And so e-waste camps are these like village-sized phenomena also spread throughout the continent where basically our tech goes to die. When we trade in our phones and our laptops and all this stuff, the planes that fly out the Colton, like when they fly in from the West, they fly in all of our old tech, and it's piled and separated, and scavenger culture allows people to go in there and take out the copper and anything that can be recycled from an old computer and what have you. And so those two phenomenon had me thinking about, of course, I started writing this about 2011, 2012, so it's also like the Arab Spring, WikiLeaks, Chelsea Manning, all this stuff going on. So, I was thinking a lot about the idea of, on one hand, the history of all these, precious resources that has fueled Western modernization, Western imperialism, I mean, you name it. Name which, commodity you take for granted in your life. Is it the rubber in your tires, the coffee in your morning, the sugar in your coffee, the list is on and on and on and on. The diamonds and gold that serve as the foundation of, the capitalist system, all of these things are, proper resources that are found on the continent. And the irony is that, you Google what are the poorest countries, and these same countries where these resources are found are listed as the poorest countries because of the way in which Westerners have imposed themselves. And the irony is really that our modern tech and all of our digital advances are based on really analog exploitation models.
Right. Yeah. Extraordinary.
Yeah, that haven't been modernized at all.
17th century.
Yeah, and it's still there. And so the idea of the film was really about the idea of, well, what if that coltan, what if that precious mineral that you find when you mine into a mountain, right? What if it's there? What if it holds that power because of the bodies that have been buried in that land, because of the feet that have walked across it, the lives that have been lived over it, and that the people who sleep on that land are charged,
right?
Like phones, when we plug them in, are charged by that and literally wake up to the realization of the power that they're literally sleeping and walking on. And so playing with those ideas led to this, because the film, in description might sound more political than, I'm sure the film, I have no idea.
But it's also extraordinarily lyrical.
It's lyrical, visionary. It's its own thing. So anyway, it's its own thing also because of how we funded it and what was important to us in terms of how we wanted to tell the story, the people we wanted to tell the story, the language we wanted to tell the story in. Because, of course, if we were to go a traditional route, if I were to go to a Hollywood producer, which I contemplated, the first question always was, I did more than contemplate. I spoke to a few producers, and their first question was always, well, who's in it?
Yeah.
Which meant that, if I don't have that A-list whatever actor, then, that relegates what type of funding they want to give me. But it also means that if I do have that A-list actor that's on their A-list, what's the odds of me finding one that speaks Kinyarwanda? Right?
Right. That's the language of Rwanda.
Yeah. Which means, and of course they're also gonna be like, oh, no, we can't put it in Kinyarwanda and Kirundi. It needs to be in English because that's the bankable, language and what have you. And so all the compromise that comes with making a film, we kind of danced away from and avoided. And so when the film hits you, it hits you also, even if it's subconsciously with for example, we've premiered this thing in France. right? And in France, there's this thing called they started this thing called the francophonie, which kind of perpetuates their colonial relationship with all of their old
Mali,
you know, and so it turns out that like maybe 85% of any films coming out of the continent are funded by the francophonie, right? Unless you're in Nigeria or South Africa, like you're getting money from them, and so it's actually pretty rare to get a film from the continent that's not from South Africa or Nigeria that's not funded by the French. But the thing is, if you take that French funding from the CNC, their cinema financing, well, the first rule is that 55 or 65% of your film needs to be in French,
right?
Because that's also the role of the francophonie is to ensure the perpetuation of the French language and culture.
Stand up to the perfidious English.
Which
Got
is
like 4 lines of French in the film.
yeah, but we didn't take any money from them.
No, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What was important for me was that, you know, because as an American, where people don't speak necessarily, you know, like we have a lot of Spanish Americans who speak Spanish and English, and then you have, you know, it's America. There's a lot of different people, but overall, you know, you have this kind of like monomaniac relationship to language that's slowly progressing as the power structures acknowledge who's actually fucking in the country, right? But for me, being in places like Rwanda or just traveling throughout the world, I was always amazed at the fluidity of language. You know, like when you're chilling with people who say what works best in whatever language they know, and they know about 5 languages. So they're like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Okay, you get it? Da, 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 da. Fuck that. You know, but it's all different languages, and it's the way it works.
I always said, like those, especially mixing with a lot of Arabs, they would be going kind of, he set his trousers on fire. What's going on?
But I always admired that, and I wanted the film to reflect that, and so the film reflects that. So yes, there's a little bit of French, there's a little bit of English, there's a lot of Kirundi, and there's a lot of Kinyarwanda, there's a bit of Swahili, there's a bit of Lingala, floats around. But if we were dealing with, you know, the regular people who fund films, it would be in English, which is another thing I hate in cinema. You know, like America does a film in 13th century Russia, and so the way that they play with that is like, we'll just give them weird British accents, so we'll know that they're foreign.
Well, if I may, not only that though, but you went as far as translating practically your whole album, Martin Luther
Well, let me put it,
translated it into Rwandan.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is the thing. So yes, this project is part of a multimedia project that always consisted of 3 albums, graphic novel, and musical. Oh. And the only thing that has changed in the conception of this project is that the musical was initially conceptualized for the stage. I was initially writing it for the stage, as a vehicle that I expected to be in. And so I was writing in English, blah, 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 but I found the story through the music. And so Martin Luther King was always music that belonged to this story. As I had already started working on the graphic novel and all this type of stuff, it was all part of the conception. And very early on in the conception, like in 2014, was when we shifted it from being a musical for the stage to being for film. And that was also through talks with producers who were like, we'd love to give you some private investors who were like, I'd like to be involved with this, but I would be more excited about investing if it were a film.
Oh, okay, right.
And that's because at the time I was doing a Broadway musical called Holler If You Hear Me, and I saw the producer like cough out $18 million in like, 6 weeks or something. Like, it's very expensive.
Right.
Doing a play on that in the West End or Broadway, it's extremely expensive. And so, believe it or not, for these guys with money, it was like, it's way cheaper to do a movie. And so, but it dawned on me that if we did do it as a film, this story, which was based in Burundi in the writing, we could then actually go well, we couldn't go to Burundi because of like political upheavals that began in 2015 there. So in 2016, we went to Rwanda and started auditioning, and we shot a sizzle reel. 2018, we used that sizzle reel in our Kickstarter in order to crowdfund for it, and kept on writing until 2019 when we went to shoot. So anyway, with Martin Luther King, that album, it's one of 3 that belong to this project. And so most of the time that I was writing the album, I knew actually that what I was actually doing was composing the music for the film and essentially laying down the demos, placing my voice where the actors would then come after me and learn to learn the music. I just released my demos publicly.
Okay.
And so the whole time that album was out and I was performing those songs, I knew this was gonna happen. It was in the process of happening, you know? But I was also inspired by musicals that happen like that. For example, Jesus Christ Superstar is I'm talking about the film, is a musical that happened like that. That was a #1 album that Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice did. It was a #1 album before it was ever conceived of as a musical for film, you know? So people, and so then they made the movie after the album blew up, you know? And for me, it all connects to the fact that I'm a theater kid from New York who could not understand why musicals need to sound like with that Rodgers and Hammerstein sort of, which I like old musicals, they're old, but I don't understand why a modern musical needs to be so nostalgic in its sound, so that even if you go to something like Hamilton, you can go, okay, they're rapping, but why does the music sound like, you know?
I have to say, I've never seen Hamilton. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I saw it.
You like it?
I'm actually... I did an online performance.
Musical.
I did a one-man performance of the whole of Hamilton online. The day before my dad passed away, I raised 700 quid for Aid All Syrians. It took me 5 hours to perform all of Hamilton, start to finish, and I played all the characters.
You see? So he more than likes it.
I really, really love Hamilton.
Yeah.
And then I did that before I ever saw it. And then my girlfriend took me to see it, and it was incredible.
Exactly.
It's incredible. You can get on the lottery for a £10 ticket.
But
and even Book of Mormon sounds like an old music.
It's like people are approaching the idea of a musical like, well, that means we have to do something like this, you know? And I'm like, that doesn't mean that.
Right.
Not at all. Like, life is a fucking musical.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it literally is.
Right. And the music permeates.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And there are some, like, there's a musical named Once that, I don't know if you remember that.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and so there's a musical named Once, which I think is out of Ireland. Glenn, what's his name? Yeah, it's a film.
Yeah, is it Domhnall Gleeson?
No, it's Glenn Hansard. It's Glenn Hansard, is that?
It's like a street musician.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I can actually consider that musical kind of revolutionary because the music in that film, which
Glenn
is
Hansard.
Yeah, Glenn Hansard. The music in that film happens in real time, in the same way that I'd be like, yo, have you heard the latest, whatever, Lil Sims?
Yeah.
Like, I haven't heard it yet. Like, oh, let me play it for you. And we sit back and smoke the joint and listen, you know? And then when it's done, like, that was crazy, wasn't it? Play it again, you know?
Right.
And the music in that film happens the way that music happens in life, like that, as opposed to, you know, that crazy, you know, which is beautiful for what it is,
I'm a big
you know?
Yeah.
And so I was also interested in bringing my idea of a musical into play, which also has to do with the sound of the music. Like if we're using drum machines, I was a huge fan and part of like drum and bass in the late 90s and all these different musical movements, none of which are reflected in a musical.
Right. No.
Why not? Why isn't there an electronic musical? You know?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and so this was the beginning of me starting to dabble with that idea.
And I suppose people think of LA as a movie town, but in fact, it's the center of music as well, isn't it, in the United States? Is that right?
I mean, as a New Yorker, I would be very resistant in admitting that. It's all right. It's all right. There's also New Orleans. I mean,
I'm trying to sound like I know.
yeah, but you're right. But you're right. You're right in that right now.
Yeah.
Right now, a huge fraction of the let's say commercial music industry is rooted in Los Angeles. LA is the place to be right now. More so than, I mean, and I'm not even gonna finish that statement. But yeah, LA is the place to be right now in terms of music. There's, like, you name it. In terms of commercial music.
Is downtown still hip, or is it stopped being hip again?
No, downtown is still hip.
Right.
Downtown is still hip.
I remember the first, I was in LA in the sort of early 90s working in TV and music. And when I told my agent that we'd gone downtown, she started crying.
Yeah, it wasn't hip then. Yeah, and when I used to live downtown when I first moved to LA, I lived in a artist loft community called the Brewery, which is like an old Pabst beer brewery that was converted into lofts. And which was cold, and the floors were like actually made for beer to like yeah, it was a very weird place, but cool. And that was when downtown was still a ghost town. And that was so it's in recent, like the last decade or 15 years that downtown's gotten cool. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, we used to go. Is that market still there, Mercado Central?
Yes. Yeah, it's teeming with people every day.
We felt like pioneers going there in the 90s. So, I mean, I'm sort of interested. I mean, it's not. What are your actors? What are their lives like? I mean, who are they, and what in
So
Neptune
everyone in Neptune Frost is an extraordinary artist in their own right. As actors, musicians, poets, dancers, choreographers. The guy who plays Mataluza, his name is Kaya Free. He's Burundian. A huge part of the cast are Burundian refugees in Rwanda because of the political...
I mean, just to jump in, but I mean, we hear so fucking little about Africa in the West. I mean, it's appalling. Really.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a huge political upheaval that began in 2015 in Burundi that made probably about 400,000 refugees leave Burundi, many of which entered Rwanda, and so a lot of our cast are actually Burundian refugees that were student activists and what have you, and so like the drummers who play the miners. Are an ensemble called the Himbaza Club, also refugees from Burundi. They're actual.
What's their day-to-day life like? I mean, where do they live? How do they make money? That kind of thing. Really?
No, all of them are full-time artists.
Wow.
The Himbaza Club is a performance collective of Burundian drummers, which is a very, very particular and extraordinary style and relationship to drumming, and that's what they do. They drum at weddings, ceremonies, that's their thing. We met them because Kaya, who plays Mataluza, who's a well-known rapper in Burundi, and who was also extremely politically engaged and had to get out of the country, but still operates as a musician, recording artist, videos, and the whole nine. Was like, you got to see our drummers. You got to see our drummers, and brought us to one of their rehearsals that was on a soccer field one day, and we saw these beautiful guys with these drums rehearsing, and we're like, fucking hell, we got to find a way to. So there's that. Sharila Sheja, who plays Neptune, is a singer, dancer, artist, visual artist. That's what she does full time. Same thing with Bobo. Elvis, who plays Neptune as well, is a dancer. The avatar who appears in the dream, Patolo, his name is Eric One Key, and he's a poet, musician who records albums, performs, workshops, all this type of stuff. in fact, everyone engaged. So we had an amazing costume designer / production designer named Cedric Mazzero, who's about 25, 26-year-old kind of genius in terms of just his creative vision, what have you, and yeah, he's had a fashion line. He's won awards here in London, but is still Rwanda based and is moving from like fashion into like installation art and what have you. Yeah, and then there's an older woman who plays a nun in the film, and that's Cecile Kariegba, who is the most iconic and beloved singer of contemporary Rwandan culture.
I mean, Rwanda is not without its own kind of. I mean, Rwanda. I don't know quite what the political situation is in Rwanda right now, but it's not without its own internal contradictions.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, I mean, well, I was going to tell you about Cecile. Yeah. Cecile is an extraordinary. I mean, if you look up Cecile Kariegba, you'll learn her story and her relationship to the culture. And she's 75 years old, making her screen debut in Neptune Frost. Right. And so there's kind of like a baton being handed down to like a new generation of artists from Cecile, and so in the film. And then I worked with some of these artists and other writers and poets to translate the text, the script, and the music lyrics. Like I worked with more like literary artists in Rwanda to translate the dialogue, and poets more so to translate the music lyrics. And so, yeah, all of the lives of the people in the film is they are artists, and Kigali is a very, very bustling epicenter of Rwanda, but also like like we met these people in performance spaces, open mics, concerts, clubs, We met, these are like, we got the cream of the crop of the Rwandan performance scene. Right. These are the guys who are like getting the artist grants from the Goethe Institute and like these are the really cool hipster artists there that we were able to like connect with them, and they kind of like, you got to meet some so and so and blah 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 blah, and we would do screen tests and what have you. So most of the lives of the people in the film are the lives of artists, which is still the life of artists anywhere is still like, if you live next door to a school teacher or a lawyer or whatever, they're like, you're sleeping pretty late, aren't you?
I hear that. I got to ask, and I think this is what Alexi was touching on, but while we're talking about the artist, like, because my heritage is Syrian, and if an actor in Syria was in a film that covered the topics that are covered in Neptune Frost, gender and the anti-religion, and the priest near the beginning of the film, and anti-establishment, and even there's a touch of nudity in the film as well. If an actor was in a film like that in Syria, they'd probably get arrested or end up being a refugee. And I was wondering, I would have assumed it's a similar situation in Rwanda.
We had full authority given to us by the government.
They read the script and they were fine with it and everything?
They read a treatment of the script at the time, They read what we had at the moment that we had to communicate with them, because finishing the script and the translation was a whole process, which we finished right before we shot. But yeah, they read the story, and now, of course, I mean, we premiered at Cannes. It's all over. We've had ambassadors show up. Rwandan ambassadors show up at the New York Film Festival, like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful. Because there's also this. It's like I said, when the French and Americans and Belgians go into Rwanda and shoot something, even if it touches on something in Rwanda, they're going to put it in French. And film has a very young history in Rwanda. I mentioned a Paul Robeson thing that happened, but in terms of Rwandan films by Rwandans, the first one is like maybe 2000.
Right.
Which is very different from Senegal or Mali, if in terms of filmmaking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a very different relationship to cinema. It's fresh, and it's a very different relationship to art there. Like most of the artists you might look at this film and be like, it's avant-garde or whatever, but most of the artists that I know in Rwanda are approaching art in a way more like exploratory way than like right down the middle, that thus you have Cedric who's making, when we told him he has wings and he makes these wings out of wheels and like they're coming at it, or making sandals out of motherboards and all this type of shit. Like that's the level they're on, but in terms of what have you, we had full permission from the government, and we're about to premiere it in Rwanda next month. That's super exciting for us because, of course, with COVID restrictions and what have you, it's been really hard for our actors to be able to travel to these festivals, just because not all the countries have been completely open and what have you. And it seems like some of these countries have used it as an excuse to keep certain people from entering the country. But in terms of the subject matter, what we found? Like, you can think, like you mentioned gender or something, and so like I remember talking to Kaya Free, who plays Mataluze, his mother, because at one point we thought, we want her to do a little cameo in the film, and she's an older Burundian woman, and so and she's very religious, right? And so we tell her the story of the film about, I don't want to give any of the film away, but yes, it talks, it deals with kind of gender fluidity and what have you, and we tell the story, and thinking that, very proud of ourselves, like this is a modern story, and she's like, this is that folktale that I'd tell you as a baby. Don't you remember that? And that's when you remember that all the times our elders in indigenous communities are saying like, but gender fluidity isn't new.
Right.
We always talked about this. It's just that when the colonizers came, they came with religion.
Yes.
And so we forgot these relationships and words that we had and for this already, and this like very, rigid Christian or whatever approach made us cut off these things that we knew. But we knew. And it's not new. And it's taken all this time to get us to go back to acknowledge, like,
right,
it's normal, So in terms of those discussions, religion, whatever, it wasn't a hard like bridge to cross in terms of our cast. I can't speak to the whole like government reaction to those discussions. I have no idea, but we got, we wouldn't have been able to shoot. You can't shoot a film guerrilla style in Rwanda. You know what I'm saying? That's one thing.
Yeah.
You better have government permission, Yeah. We had more than government permission. We had 100 people working for us. We had Rwandan bank accounts and payroll and all this type of shit and tax structures and all this shit that we had to do.
Yeah.
We had to be official.
Right.
That's the only way you can do it there. That's where it's rigid. It's like, it better be official. And so we had to come, to the government offices and get that support.
So what's next then? Carrying on with this. I mean,
there's a graphic novel.
Yeah.
There's a graphic novel that's being finished right now, and so that's 2022. There's all of our distribution negotiations that are going on right now for the film to be released in 2022. There's the finishing of the soundtrack for soundtrack purposes, which is also slated for 2022. So there's that's still the focus. Like we're still wrapping up the baby before it's actually like, this is also because we had to work remotely in putting this whole thing together due to COVID restrictions and what have you. We didn't see it on the big screen ourselves until Cannes. And so these were those were kind of like test screenings for us as directors, to look at it and go, we should, so there's still even a few things that we may touch before we're released in theaters. You know, yeah. So yeah, because we were forced to finish a film in this climate.
Yeah. Do you have an aim for it? And I mean, an ambition, a specific kind of ambition for
the
what
film?
you want it to be? Yeah, or the whole, I guess, the whole project.
I mean, the main thing is this: I want it to reach its audience, you know, without being, halted in any way by middlemen who think that people aren't smart enough or interested enough to get it. I mean, that's the main danger with progressive art, is it's not that people aren't ready for it. It's always that the people who stand in the middle, who are in charge of distribution structures or what have you, have their idea of people. And they always say shit like, when it's art like that, they always say shit like, I get it, I love it, I love this. But I don't know if you're average, and they have this idea of average people. And in fact, as gatekeepers, they're the most average motherfuckers who are aiming to keep people average in order to sell their fucking shit. You know what I'm saying? Right. And so the goal is on some, like, you know, it's like on some American football shit where it's like, okay, hold it, you gotta charge through this shit, you know, and that's the thing. They're trying to protect the goal. I'm on the offense, you know? I have the cleats on, the little thing, I'm holding the film like this, and I've gotta jump over these motherfuckers to get it into the finish line. And the finish line is the people. And so that's the goal, is to get it to the people. And so, like I said, we're actually at the point of negotiating with distribution, meaning that we've had offers, so that's already part of the shit, you know? Because that side of the game is what, seduction and people, like just having a broader and expansive view of people, you know? Because the networks and what have you, they want to strip down everything. They want to spoon feed you everything.
It's what the film is about.
Yeah.
It's dangerous to think.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to think.
Yeah. Exactly.
And like the film makes you think, but then and I'm extremely average as an audience, but anytime I found myself wondering what's going on here, the film almost gives you a chance to try and figure it out on your own, and then it explains it like a scene or two later.
Well, yeah. There's a part in the film
every character has a background, every character has a story, and it is explained. But you get a chance to think about it yourself before that happens, and I really like that.
Yeah, and if you go back to it again, you'll be like, oh, you know, and it's built for that as well. And we know that there's, you know, so decentering how we tell a story. Right?
Yeah.
The idea of Western narrative, once upon a time, once upon a timelessness, there's ways of, there's ways of telling a story.
Right.
That are more than just what the West presupposes is the way to do it. You know, there's all these things that we're playing with in this film, you know? And so the goal is to reach people so that they can, you know, engage with it on their own terms. And for us, it's been really important for people first to have the big screen experience.
Right.
So we're glad that we're at this stage right now and coming out in 2022, because maybe by then people will be going to theaters for real and blah, 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 because I can tell you that as an immersive experience, like when we premiered in North America, we premiered at the Toronto Film Festival and we were on an IMAX screen. Oh. Enormous. And that is a part of it that I think you guys watched it on like televisions or laptops. Yeah. That's a whole other thing. Because yeah, you can go through it and try to read all the subtitles and get it, but you see it on a big screen, you might be like, fuck reading actually. And that's a whole other thing. So, yeah, that's that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. It's great talking to you.
Okay, so that was Saul Williams. I think in my trademark fashion, it kind of dribbled to the one end slightly, but you know, I maybe should do a course in how to end interviews. Nevertheless, for me, it was an extraordinary experience, amazing, riveting. I hope it is for you as well. The hotel is starting to get busy now, so we've got to get out of here. we'll do emails next time. But thank you, and give me money.
What Alexi means there by give me money is, of course, if you're enjoying the Alexi Sale podcast and all the frills and trimmings that we put out on our YouTube and Instagram as well, please consider visiting our Patreon page and donating some of your money to it. It would mean a lot to us, of course, if you can afford it. If not, please continue enjoying listening to the show for free. We really love making this show for you all. But if you've got some spare cash and looking for somewhere good to put it, hey, head over to patreon.com/Alexisel podcast. That's patreon.com/Alexisel podcast. And consider donating. Thank you very much. Back to the outro.
You've been listening to the Alexi Sale podcast. This show is produced and edited by Talal Kalkuti. Music by Tarbush Records. Thanks to Anthony Overton for the sound mixing. And to Audio Boom for hosting us. Please keep your emails coming in at alexiselpodcast@gmail.com. Goodbye.